My mother always told me that when a man is planning a betrayal, he doesn't change his habits, he changes his background noise. For 5 years, my marriage to Julian was a sanctuary of predictable noises. The hum of the coffee maker at 6:30 a.m., the rhythmic thud of his running shoes on the treadmill, and the low, comforting murmur of him reading financial reports in bed. We were the couple our friends envied, a high-earning cybersecurity architect and a boutique interior designer, living in a beautifully renovated brownstone, planning our first child. Our life was a masterpiece of curated stability. Then, the noise stopped. It was replaced by a suffocating, deliberate silence. It began with the AI Privacy Vault. Julian's company had just launched a cutting-edge, local encryption ecosystem meant to secure corporate secrets on personal devices. As the lead architect, Julian brought the beta version home. He explained, with that smooth, calculated academic voice of his, that it was a necessary precaution. Suddenly, his phone wasn't just locked, it was integrated into a dynamic, biometric behavioral lock. If the phone detected a micro-tremor in the grip that didn't match Julian's baseline, or if the ambient audio wasn't authenticated, the screen went completely black. "It's just the future of data protection, honey," he whispered one night, kissing my forehead. His lips felt cold, like marble. In 2026, data is more valuable than blood. But I didn't care about corporate data. I cared about the fact that whenever he received a notification, his pupils dilated in a way I had never seen before. It was a predator's look. A hunger. The first crack in the facade appeared during a mundane Tuesday dinner. Julian was in the shower, and his Privacy Vault phone was sitting on the granite kitchen island. Suddenly, the screen flashed. The ambient audio lock didn't trigger because the kitchen was dead silent. I didn't touch the phone, I knew better than to trigger the biometric security, but I stood over it. The notification wasn't text. It was a localized, real-time data stream encryption request from a contact labeled simply as system_root_00. The preview text read, "The neural sync is ready for the weekend. The physical proxy is cleared." My heart didn't just beat, it hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Physical proxy? Neural sync? It sounded like high-level tech jargon, but the timestamp of the message coincided exactly with a mandatory corporate retreat Julian had booked for the upcoming Friday in Aspen. Instead of confronting him and watching him use his brilliant mind to gaslight me into oblivion, I decided to play on my own turf. I am an interior designer. My entire career is based on spatial awareness, hidden structural flaws, and observing human behavior in private environments. I didn't need to hack his phone. I needed to hack his reality. The next morning, while Julian was at the office, I called an old friend from university who worked in forensic signal analysis. I didn't ask him to break into Julian's encrypted network that would trigger a silent alarm at his corporate headquarters. Instead, we did something much more old school. We mapped the electromagnetic leakage of our own house. Every time a phone transmits a high-bandwidth encrypted video or audio file, it generates a microscopic spike in local radio frequency emissions. We installed ultra-wideband RF loggers disguised as minimalist smart plugs throughout the brownstone. If Julian was sending or receiving heavy media files in secret, the house itself would record the exact timestamp, data volume, and room location. For 3 days, the logs were normal. Then came Thursday night, the eve of his Aspen trip. Julian told me he was going down to our basement gym to do some late-night cardio. According to our smart home system, the treadmill was turned on. The motor was running at a steady 6.5 miles per hour. But upstairs in our bedroom, my monitor showed a massive, unprecedented spike in data transmission originating not from the gym but from our guest bedroom closet. A room we hadn't used in 2 years. I crept down the hallway, my bare feet sinking into the hardwood. The house was pitch black except for the faint, eerie blue glow bleeding from beneath the guest room door. I pushed it open an inch. Julian wasn't on the treadmill. He was sitting on the floor of the closet, surrounded by acoustic foam panels to dampen the sound. He was wearing a state-of-the-art mixed reality headset. His hands were moving through the air, tracing invisible contours, his fingers trembling with an intense, almost pathetic desperation. But it was what he was saying into his wireless microphone that shattered my universe into a million jagged pieces. "The AI model is perfect, Clara," Julian whispered, his voice thick with an obsessive infatuation I had never heard him direct toward me in my entire life. "I fed the algorithm every single letter you wrote me in college, every voicemail, every photo. The real-time generation is so flawless it feels like I'm touching you. The way the AI mimics your laugh, it's better than reality. But I'm tired of the digital simulation. Tomorrow, in Aspen, the proxy is ready. No more headsets. I finally get to hold the flesh and blood version of you." I stood there in the dark, the cold air of the hallway filling my lungs. My husband wasn't just having an affair. He had used his world-class AI engineering skills to build a predictive behavioral model of his college ex-girlfriend, simulating an entire relationship in our guest closet, all while using a corporate retreat as a cover to launch the real-world finale. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I stepped back into the shadows, a dark, venomous clarity washing over me. He thought he was the ultimate architect of data. He had no idea I was about to redesign his entire life into a prison. The true weakness of any tech genius is their profound arrogance. They believe that because the rest of the world doesn't understand their code, the rest of the world is blind. Julian left for Aspen at 5 a.m. the next morning, kissing my cheek with the practiced affection of a ghost. "Have a good weekend, sweetie. Don't work too hard on the new project," he said, adjusting his collar. "Oh, I won't," I smiled, watching his Uber pull away. "I'm focusing entirely on reconstruction." The moment he crossed the state line, my operation went live. I didn't follow him to Aspen myself, that would be sloppy. Instead, I hired Alpha Investigative Group, a high-end agency specializing in corporate espionage and high-net-worth divorces. I didn't just want photos of him kissing another woman outside a ski chalet. In 2026, a photo can be dismissed in court as a deepfake or an AI-generated fabrication. Julian's defense attorneys would tear standard photographic evidence to shreds. I needed unassailable, multi-layered, immutable physical and digital telemetry. I provided the investigators with the exact MAC addresses of Julian's devices, his car's integrated eSIM, and the specific RF signatures we had logged in our house. By midday Friday, they had tracked him to a secluded, multi-million-dollar ultra-luxury A-frame cabin deep in the mountains outside Aspen. The cabin wasn't registered in his name, it was rented through a shell company owned by a woman named Clara Vance. His college sweetheart. The woman whose digital ghost he had been cultivating in our closet. Through the investigators' long-range lenses, the reality of his betrayal unfolded. Clara was real, but she wasn't just a passive participant. The surveillance feed showed her waiting on the deck, holding 2 glasses of wine. When Julian arrived, he didn't just hug her. He looked at her with a terrifying, reverent awe, as if his AI creation had suddenly stepped out of the screen and into the snow. But while they were enjoying their romantic, fire-lit isolation, my team was deploying the digital dragnet. Julian had made one fatal mistake. To run his high-bandwidth, real-time behavioral AI model from a remote cabin, he couldn't rely on spotty mountain cellular data. He had brought his own mobile satellite uplink, a proprietary corporate device that bypassed standard public networks. To ensure it worked perfectly, he had whitelisted a single, trusted external IP address to monitor the system's stability from home. That whitelist IP address belonged to our home router. The router he thought only he knew how to configure. Sitting at my kitchen island, using the remote access portal my friend had set up for me, I bridged into Julian's satellite uplink. I was now inside his private network in Aspen. I could see everything his system was processing. And that's when I discovered the true depth of his depravity. Julian hadn't just built an AI model to reminisce about his ex. He had integrated our joint financial assets into a smart contract blockchain protocol to fund a completely parallel life. He had systematically transferred over $2.4 million from our shared investment accounts, assets my father had helped us establish, into a decentralized autonomous organization, DAO, managed by his AI framework. The algorithm was automatically buying real estate, funding offshore accounts, and setting up a trust fund for Clara Vance. He wasn't just cheating on me, he was digitally erasing me from his financial future, using a self-executing script that would trigger the moment our divorce papers were eventually filed. He thought he was leaving me with a beautifully decorated, empty house and a pile of untraceable digital dust. Two can play at systemic automation, Julian, I whispered to the empty kitchen. Instead of shutting down the transfer or locking the accounts, which would have alerted him instantly, I did something far more devastating. I used his own biometric master key, which was still cached on our home network from his Thursday night closet session, to alter the smart contract's destination parameters. I didn't send the money back to our joint accounts. I rerouted the entire $2.4 million payload into a highly secure, non-custodial legal escrow account managed by a top-tier forensic divorce law firm in New York City. The trigger condition for the contract wasn't a divorce filing anymore. The trigger condition was his satellite uplink detecting his location back at John F. Kennedy Airport on Sunday night. Next, I turned my attention to his corporate reputation. Julian's employer was a defense-grade security firm with a zero-tolerance policy for intellectual property theft. He had used their proprietary, unreleased beta software, the Privacy Vault, and their neural processing engines, for non-corporate, deeply personal, and fraudulent financial activities. I compiled a clean, undeniable data packet, the RF logs from our guest room closet, the satellite data streams from the Aspen cabin showing the software being run on non-authorized servers, and the high-definition surveillance footage of him and Clara gathered by my private investigators. I scheduled the email to be sent to his company's chief compliance officer and board of directors at exactly 8 p.m. on Sunday. As Saturday night fell, I watched the remote data feed from the cabin slow down. The system logs showed they had turned off the lights. The betrayal was complete. The man I had loved for a half-decade had completely discarded me for a digital fantasy turned real. But as I sat alone in our dark brownstone, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like an executioner waiting for the clock to strike midnight. Sunday night arrived with the brutal precision of a falling guillotine. I was sitting in our living room, the lights dimmed, a single glass of scotch resting on the table beside me. The grandfather clock chimed 9 p.m. Right on cue, the front door lock clicked, and Julian stepped into the foyer. He looked exhausted but wore a subtle, smug smile of absolute satisfaction. The smile of a man who thought he had successfully lived 2 lives in one weekend. "Hey sweetie," he said, dropping his duffel bag. "The mountain reception was terrible, sorry I couldn't FaceTime." The retreat was incredibly intense. I'm completely wiped out. I know exactly how intense it was, Julian, I said, my voice cutting through the silence like dry ice. He paused, his hand hovering over his coat rack. He laughed nervously. What do you mean? I picked up my iPad and tapped the screen. The massive 75-inch media wall in the living room flared to life. It didn't show a movie. It displayed a split-screen matrix. On the left, the high-definition video of him kissing Clara in the aspen snow. On the right, the scrolling green lines of code showing the $2 million transfer logs and the AI framework he had built in our guest closet. Julian's face went from a healthy winter tan to a horrific, pasty white in less than a second. His breath caught in his throat. Alice, what? This is a deepfake. Someone hacked my systems. This isn't real. Don't insult my intelligence, Julian. It destroys the only thing about you I still respect, I said, taking a slow sip of my drink. At 8 p.m. tonight, that exact data packet was delivered to your CEO. Your proprietary access has already been revoked. Look at your phone. With trembling hands, he pulled out his ultra-secure phone. The screen was dead black. A single line of red system text read, "Device deauthorized by corporate command. IP theft protocol active." He dropped the phone onto the rug as if it had burned him. Alice, please. We can talk about this. Clara it was just an infatuation, a digital experiment that got out of hand. The money is still in our network. No, it isn't, I replied calmly. The moment your plane landed at JFK, your smart contract executed. The $2 million is currently sitting in a New York Supreme Court legal escrow account. My lawyers have already filed for an emergency asset freeze based on marital fraud and corporate embezzlement. He sank to his knees right there in the foyer, staring at the screen displaying his ruined life. The tech genius, the cybersecurity god, completely dismantled not by a rival hacker, but by the wife he thought was too simple to notice the background noise. You've ruined me, he whispered, looking up at me with genuine terror. I have nothing left. You have your digital ghost, Julian. Go see if she can build you a new life. I stood up, walked past him without a single glance, and stepped out into the crisp night air, leaving him alone in the dark with his dying code.